Judiciary Committee's longstanding bipartisan practice of vetting presidential nominees. A little history. The FBI dates back to the start of the last century, 1908, when then Attorney General Charles Bonaparte organized a special agent force. J. Edgar Hoover became director of the FBI in 1924 and led the Bureau for 48 years until his death in 1972. He is credited with professionalizing the Bureau and developing its investigative ability. However, with little or no oversight, Hoover also used the Bureau's investigative powers improperly. He infamously directed the FBI to spy on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, and other civil rights leaders of the day. In 1975, the United States Senate created Frank Church's committee, and they disclosed widespread abuses by the FBI and other U.S. intelligence agencies. The Church Committee concluded these agencies had engaged in illegal surveillance, and as a result, quote, groups and individuals have been assaulted, repressed, harassed, and disrupted because of their political views, social beliefs, and their lifestyles. And, quote, the intelligence agencies have served the political and personal objectives of presidents and other high officials. The Hoover era of the FBI, the Watergate scandal, and the findings of the Church Committee highlighted the risk of political interference in FBI investigations and led to significant, important reform. In 1976, Congress passed a law that limits the FBI director to a single term of 10 years, which was intended to insulate that position from political influence. And critically, we made the FBI director's appointment subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. That's why we're here today. Since 1935, the motto of the FBI has been fidelity, bravery, integrity. These qualities represent the Bureau's core values and the high standards that are expected of all of its employees, including the director of the FBI. After meeting with Mr. Patel and reviewing his record, I do not believe you meet this standard. Mr. Patel has neither the experience, the temperament, nor the judgment to lead an agency of 38,000 agencies and 400 field offices around the globe. During the time I've served on this committee, I've had the opportunity to consider 4 FBI director nominations. Each one was a Republican, and I voted for all of them. My concerns about the director of the FBI are not partisan. As much as Republicans claim that President Biden and former Attorney General Garland weaponized the FBI, let's look at the record. President Biden kept the FBI director, a lifelong Republican who had been appointed by President Trump. Contrast that with President Trump. Fired his first FBI director, James Comey, forced out his second FBI director, Chris Wray, for being insufficiently loyal. With Mr. Patel, however, obviously the president has found a loyalist. Mr. Patel's loyalty includes touting conspiracy theories that threatened efforts at President Trump's enemies. How do we know Mr. Patel's theories, his beliefs, what motivates him, what he really believes? He wrote it in a book. This book, Government Gangsters, I urge all of you to read before you cast a vote for this gentleman. Mr. Patel has published at the back of this book a list of 60 people whom he calls, quote, members of the deep state, 60. This list includes many distinguished public servants who've dedicated their lives to our nation. Among them are Democrats and Republicans, including former Trump administration officials like the former Secretary of Defense Esper. Then there is Mr. Patel's plan to, quote, and I quote him, shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one, reopen it the next day as a museum of the deep state. And he has said, quote, we're going to come after people in the media. We're going to come after you. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we're putting you all on notice. Does this sound like the kind of nonpartisan law enforcement professional who should lead the FBI? No, not to me. This is someone who's left behind a trail of grievances throughout his life, lashing out at anyone who disrespects him or doesn't agree with him. Don't take it from me. Listen to these Republicans who worked with him during the Trump's first administration. Attorney General Bill Barr, and I quote, "I categorically oppose making Patel Deputy FBI Director. I said it would happen over my dead body. Patel had virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency." National Security Advisor John Bolton, "I didn't think he was qualified. He demonstrated no policy aptitude at all. I was forced to hire him." President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor, Charles Kupperman, "The idea that Kash Patel is going to be the FBI director is appalling. His legal career is modest at best. His ideas are ludicrous." CI Director Gina Haspel threatened to resign after President Trump proposed making Mr. Patel CIA Deputy Director. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Mr. Patel lied about whether Nigeria had approved a hostage rescue operation, putting American lives at risk. But Mr. Patel would have us believe that all of these public servants, all Republicans, all from the first Trump administration, and apparently anyone else who's critical of him, are nothing but government gangsters and deep state members. Many of them have made his list of enemies. Just this week, CNN reported that during the Trump administration, CIA officials referred Mr. Patel to the Justice Department for criminal investigation for sharing classified information without authorization. Last week, I asked the Justice Department and intelligence community for information on any criminal referrals relating to misconduct by Mr. Patel. I have yet to receive a response. Mr. Patel's record is clear. He traffics in debunked conspiracy theories that serve or benefit his political beliefs. Let's start with January 6th, and he dedicates a whole chapter in this book on January 6th. That's something that each and every one of us, as witnesses to January 6th, have our own view of. I'll be grateful always to the Capitol Hill police officers who risked their lives defending me, members of Congress, and visitors to the United States Capitol on that day. Mr. Patel posted on social media, quote, "January 6th, never an insurrection. Cowards in uniform exposed." End of quote. Let me repeat that. Cowards in uniform exposed. Who was in the Capitol building on January 6th in a uniform? The Capitol Police were. Do you think they were cowards? Many of them risked their lives and some gave their lives in defense of this building. How about the D.C. police who were here as well? They were in uniform. Cowards risking their lives as well, some of them being battered and beaten by these mobsters that came into the Capitol. And Mr. Patel claims that the FBI agency aspires to lead. Get this now. Was planning January 6th for a year. He says the FBI was planning January 6th for a year. That's a quote. Mr. Patel has gone so far as to co-produce and sell musical recordings of a song performed by January 6 rioters in jail, rioters who violently assaulted police officers. He has described this January 6 choir as, quote, political prisoners. Political prisoners. But at least 6 members pleaded guilty to assaulting law enforcement officers on January 6. All 6 have now been pardoned by President Trump. Here are some of those people who received blanket clemency by President Trump on his first day in office in the second term. Julian Cater assaulted Capitol police officers with pepper spray, incapacitating 3 officers. Ryan Nichols sprayed pepper spray on multiple police officers. After the attack, Nichols posted on Facebook, and I quote, "So yes, I'm calling for violence and I will be violent." Jordan Mink struck officers, quote, aggressively with a long pole. He spat at officers and threw large items at them. Armed with a knife, Ronald Sandlin shouted at officers, quote, "You're going to die. Get out of the way." Sandlin shoved officers when they tried to lock the doors to the Senate gallery. After breaching the Capitol, James McGrew struck an officer and lunged for his baton. McGrew also threw a wooden handrail with metal brackets at officers. I want to read a sentence from this book on the January 6th experience, just to give you an idea of Mr. Patel's take on what he calls a haphazard riot. By everything we could see, the crowd at the Capitol was unarmed or armed only with non-lethal objects like bottles, flagpoles, or bike racks. Mr. Patel has also peddled conspiracy theories for his own financial benefit, promoting a line of dietary supplements that claim to help people detox from COVID-19 vaccines. During my time on this committee, I was fortunate to get to know and work with former FBI Director Bob Mueller. I met him a few days after 9/11. That's when he took over the FBI. I trusted him, I worked with him, I did everything I could to help him, because I believed that the FBI was a critical central agency in restoring America's confidence that we were safe. Bob Mueller was an extraordinary man. Oh, he was a Republican, make no bones about it. He said it and admitted, and I knew it. He comes from the San Francisco area. And when he was in college and graduated, a friend of his, a year ahead of him, had enlisted in the Marine Corps and was killed in Vietnam. Bob was inspired to do the same thing, join up in the Marine Corps, and he did. And he was a first lieutenant in Vietnam. He received a Bronze Star with a Valor Pin, and he also received a Purple Heart. He was injured in battle. I read about his experience because after he was healed from that wound to his leg, he returned to combat. He was just that kind of fella. Regardless of party, he was a real American. He was a longtime federal prosecutor, a U.S. attorney, the head of the DOJ's criminal division, and acting deputy attorney general before he became head of the FBI. After 9/11, I worked with him, and we had a good relationship, a professional relationship. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I respected him so much for what he had given to this country. In this book, Mr. Patel calls Director Bob Mueller, quote, a swamp creature. With all due respect, Mr. Patel, I've not worn the uniform of this country, and neither of you. To think that you would denigrate Bob Mueller's service to our country and call him a swamp creature is an indication of the depths your political views take you. The FBI plays a critical role in keeping America safe from terrorism, violent crime, and other threats. Our nation needs an FBI director who understands the gravity of this mission and is ready on day one, not someone who is consumed by his own personal political grievances. The American people deserve an FBI director focused on keeping our families safe from terrorism, drug trafficking, and violent crime, not this checklist of grievances we find in this book. Mr. Patel, your record makes it clear you're not that person. I yield.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. Before I call on Senator Tellis, I want to clear up something the way I see it, and I think I'm going to invite everybody that it can be cleared up. This business about what Mr. Patel said about cowards in uniform, it's a mischaracterization of what he actually said. So I'm going to invite you to listen to the interview Mr. Patel gave that linked to his post to hear what he actually said. When he said cowards in uniform, he was talking about senior Pentagon leadership failing to mobilize the National Guard to protect the Capitol. His comments had nothing to do with police. Mr. Patel made his comments while discussing an article in the New York Times exposing grave miscommunication between the Department of Defense and the D.C. National Guard. So I would encourage people to follow up on that. Senator Tellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking